How's it going, everybody? So, what we're going to talk about today is basically the how to get into a DAO, how to start a DAO, because covering DAOs, you hear a lot about DAOs that already exist. So, what my panel and I plan to discuss is how to do that, so that you can get an idea of what goes into it. So, gentlemen, if you would please introduce yourself, starting on my right.
Hey guys, I'm Mounir, founder of Paraswap. Mostly in charge of product and operations. I have a technical background. Paraswap started almost more than 2 years ago, actually. And we are a decentralized exchange aggregator running on Ethereum in various exchanges. And the second one was Polygon.
Hello everyone, I'm Sandeep. I'm the founder at one of the co-founders at Polygon.
So, DAOs have been around for at least 6 years. So when you have someone approach you with bringing it up as like, hey, what's this thing? How do we get into it? What's the first thing that you normally tell them in here?
So we can map DAOs to existing organizations, whether those are foundations and nonprofits that have different stakeholders with common interest on making this organization succeed. But then it depends on the context. What is this DAO? What is it doing? The most important part of this DAO is this D, that is decentralized and autonomous, but I think it's a spectrum, and DAOs are still in their early stages, even though it's 6 years ago. But we feel like always it's like a nascent ecosystem or a nascent movement. So I guess yes, DAO is still in their infancy and growing, and it's a case-by-case definition.
What do you think, Sandeep?
Yeah, I mean, I agree to that. DAOs, even though we've been kind of toying with this concept of DAOs for multiple years now, but I think only in this year or maybe some part of the last year. I mean 2021, we saw a lot of DAOs coming in. I think one of the reasons is also like if you see it on a higher scale, why these DAOs emerged in this high kind of velocity is the application layer emerged in 2020-21 only, right? So before that, the blockchains were primarily in the infrastructure era, like all the protocols that were raising money, launching projects and all that, they were all infrastructure projects. But only in 2020, once DeFi took off, after that NFT took off and all that, these applications layers started growing. And then at the end, the idea of this, the whole Web3 is that the applications in Web3 will be owned by community. So that's when, like, I think, the real DAOs, which have a purpose, which have some purpose to do, which is on-chain, started emerging. And that's why we started seeing so many of DAOs. And now I think, like, now we have so many applications in the space. The innovation on the DAO tooling and all that is only now catching up to the amount of demand. And I've been in these conferences for last 4 or 5 years, and every time, like for example in 2020, before everything shut down because of COVID, I came to ETH Denver, everybody was building DeFi. And then in 2020, end part of 2020 and early 2021, in all the hackathons it was NFT. So NFT picked up then from there, and I see now in a lot of hackathons people are doing a lot of stuff around DAOs. So I think that that inflection point of DAOs is just around the corner. Maybe this year, next year, we'll see a DAO summer, as we see in crypto, like DeFi summer, NFT summer. We might have a DAO summer soon.
Well, I think that comes from situations like Constitution DAO and now Assange DAO. I mean, Constitution DAO raised 47 million to buy a copy of the Constitution, right? And you have Assange DAO who raised 53 million. Free Ross DAO raised millions, and it's just the amount of money these groups are able to raise relatively quickly. That could have a reason for how people are getting really interested in what this is. But the next question I have is, why form a DAO to raise money around something when there's already fundraising platforms out there? What do you think is the benefit or why someone would want to do this rather than use what's already available?
Well, I think the first thing that can come to mind is the simplicity for using the Ethereum blockchain or any other chain that's running on Ethereum, while using those traditional crowdsourcing or crowdfunding platforms require an extra step and an overhead, and it also lacks some privacy elements, which are native to crypto. But also the crypto community has also a good amount of wealth that's been created the last few years. So I would resume it into efficiency and simplicity, and also a large amount of wealth that was created in the Ethereum ecosystem. And it's very intuitive to raise funds. And here we're not raising funds because we're making an investment. We're raising funds for a good cause. And I think it's a way of giving back what was earned during this last 3 years, I would say.
Sandy?
I think first we need to understand the categories of the DAO. Like right now, I think we are only talking about these community DAOs where community is raising, coming together, putting funds, and then they are doing some financial kind of activity, like let's say investing in NFTs, or like this Constitution DAO that you said. Funnily, like Austin, who's the founder of Constitution DAO, he just joined Polygon with us. So we see this DAO stuff happening from very close quarters. Like in fact, I myself participated in and bought the Matthew Ball's, the original metaverse kind of essay that he wrote like long time back to kind of start this metaverse DAO and things like that. So this is one category of DAO. Like I think we need to also see that all the protocols like Paraswap, like the decentralized high quality protocols like Paraswap, Compound, Uniswap, they all are also effectively run by DAOs. Those are also DAOs, like in a way. These, like when you are talking about this raising money and like the community DAOs where and also for-profit DAOs, these are also for-profit DAOs. Like some of them, not many of them are non-profit DAOs, right? For-profit DAOs are basically where communities coming together and they are trying to do some financial activity. Let's say Pleaser DAO, where you start buying NFTs. And why it has become so popular right now is that with some of these Pleaser DAO, FWB DAO and all that, right? They have been able to, grow the AUM of the NFTs they bought by a very large extent. And due to that, like, there is more propensity in the market that some of these DAOs like that can also do really good for their, DAO members and early investors. I think that is also resulting in a, like some of these DAOs catching a lot of community kind of attention. But of course, there is also a purpose, like, as we said, that Julian Assange and Constitution DAO, these are prime examples where communities coming together with some sort of purpose. And, there's expectation that this, let's say, Constitution DAO, if they've bought the NFT of Constitution, like, in future that could have become like really, really big. And then the DAO can also venture into a lot of other things after that. Like, maybe they could buy more constitutions from other countries and things like that. So there is some financial motivation also from the investors. Plus, of course, there is some, purpose behind these also.
Well, you bring up a good point about for-profit DAOs, because one thing that I've noticed covering DAOs is that most of them have a aesthetic, a central thing to them. Like, for example, Spice DAO was originally called Dune DAO, and the whole point of them was to buy the Dune Bible, Alejandro Jodorowsky's Dune Bible, right? But when you're just based on one thing, Dune DAO, Constitution DAO, what do you do after that? Like, where do you move on after you've accomplished whatever it is you're trying to do? Or should DAOs be more vague, I guess is the question.
See, the fun part about DAOs is that everything is changeable as per community vote. So as you said that, Dune DAO became Spice DAO. So DAO can eventually, this, let's say Constitution DAO, they came together to do one particular part, but eventually they can easily decide that, hey, let's rebrand. At the end, it's a company, right? Run by individuals, and they can decide the future course of DAO.
What do you think?
I think, yeah, there are some similarities with startups where we start with some hypotheses and some, I would say, ideas on the markets, and then depending on how, or the evolution of the product, which is at the end what a DAO is building, this may lead to a pivot, or maybe to an evolution, or maybe to just an expansion, and that I think it's normal from what we saw in traditional startups. And DAOs are like startups, except that they are broader and more open and more decentralized, with the spectrum that I was mentioning in the beginning.
One thing that I've noticed though, I don't know, maybe it's just because of resources available. A lot of DAOs exist on Discord and Twitter and very centralized platforms. And quite frankly, Discord doesn't really care for DAOs. So why do you think DAOs use those platforms specifically? Like, because you could spin up a Discord server in a few minutes, right?
Um, I think like there is some effort from Discord or some popular platform where they want to have like joint ownership as the admin of the of the channel, but I don't recall who was building that. But again, this comes back to the DAO tooling, which is in very early stages. Like people are actually trying to do this. For example, I know few teams who are building this front end which uses Telegram in the back end, right? So they are giving you a front end interface where, let's say, you can actually do some things using or some signatures where with your addresses, and then like something which is in their custody but that requires the signature from this thing also then can do some activity on Telegram. So this is one layer, one kind of solution that I'm seeing which are using these existing social platforms to build the DAO toolings. Like for marketing of DAOs, I also met a team which is trying to, let's say, use Instagram and Facebook and all that underlying. So you see the DAO interface, but underlying it is using APIs of Instagram and like other social websites. So that's one thing. But the second thing is that there is native DAO tooling also. There are a lot of teams who are trying to build it. Like people trying to build a decentralized, if not a decentralized Discord, but at least a Discord where you can create a channel which can be owned and governed by the DAO, multi-sig or smart contracts and things like that. So I think we are early in that journey, but all this tooling is being developed.
Discord, you can also have this connection between a wallet where you identify yourself. It's still using Web 2.0 technologies, but still it creates a bridge between the decentralized world and Discord. So I think maybe in future we'll see a decentralized Discord, or maybe Discord will decentralize itself, given that I think the biggest communities in Discord are, after maybe gaming is crypto. So maybe this is an incentive for Discord to at least create a variation that is sufficiently decentralized for DAOs.
Yeah, and some early tooling, like I would recommend a lot of people, like who've not experienced, maybe look at Collabland, which is like token gated community, DAO House, and things like that, who are building these toolings for DAOs to kick off and govern.
You mentioned earlier, Mounir, about startups. So moving forward, do you see DAOs as less of a social thing like they are on Discord, for example, and more like a traditional startup where it's more like this is because they're not supposed to be, right? It's not supposed to be a tower, it's supposed to be a net. Like instead of going up and down, it spreads out, right? So do you think you see that happening more, or how do you see this developing?
I mean, I'm not sure whether DAOs are not supposed to be startups. Ideally, DAO should be able to be a startup if they want to be. Like, of course, if the community wants. It's just that those design patterns or those behavioral patterns or those governance patterns have not evolved. For example, like one of the biggest criticism of DAO is that it's very hard for it's very hard to do fast decision making, right? And people are countering that with, let's say, making delegated committees where, let's say, you are creating a DAO which invests in protocols, right, or other projects. So you can create a subcommittee or an investment sub DAO within your larger DAO, which where the community chooses GPs for that, and then based on their performance, community can promote them or fire them, right? These kind of design patterns should emerge where the delegates then can take a very fast decision making, in that sense. Similarly, as a startup, one other big problem I see, which I feel is very big problem, is that startups at times have to be competitive in nature, right? Like, so, you can't discuss your future ideas if you being a startup on a public Discord where, let's say, the people from your other competitive company can also be there, right? So how can these ideas which a startup might want to run can be discussed in a private way while still the community can contribute or community can participate in that? Those are some of the challenges which I see, but I actually definitely see that startups should be DAOs should be startups. Otherwise, this will not go. Like the non-profit thing and this casual stuff, then DAOs will not be able to realize the full potential. We want the whole world, the enterprises to come to DAO.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not mutually exclusive. And when you're building an early stage startup, it's hard to have a large team in any ways. I mean, it's always more efficient to have a small and concise team. And DAOs, I don't see the exception here. And that's something we can see even in anonymous DAOs like Olympus Pro, where they have a core team that is contributing. And the team is like the DAO, sorry, the crowd that's participating on the DAO. You can map it to when I create a startup, when I create a product, I still have a community. I still need a community. I still need early adopters. So I can see those early adopters as these guys who are parts of the DAO. But the difference here is that these guys have an influence, have a voice, and they can also challenge or make the core team have some kind of accountability for these guys where that's something we're not seeing in startups, but I think we need that in startups. So when we create an early stage product, we love to have a community of early adopters that are super passionate, and now we're giving these guys an incentive and a part of this community. So it's like we're building a public company, but this is a startup, and it's all happening on a blockchain that is completely transparent. So I think, yeah, that's an upgrade in startups that we're seeing right now. There is no playbook or something we should just follow as we may have in startups like lean startup methods and so on. But I think we can have something meets in the middle and use that as a leverage in order to grow the product and make it, I would say, more successful because we're getting a second eye, we're getting a native community that have a share on the protocol.
Yeah. And I also want to add that, we also should not look at it as a 0 to 1 thing. So for example, you might not need a DAO on day 0. Like for example, let's take example of Paraswap, right? Like Mounir has been, working for years now, right? And then only let's say 1.5 years back they launched, and now like they have the big community. They are now slowly DAOing their startup, right? So that could also be one journey. You start as a startup, Web3 startup, and then eventually convert into a DAO. And one other thing I wanted to say that so one other way could be progressive decentralization of a DAO, right? You don't need probably 50,000 members in your Discord on day 0. You could start with 20 people, 30 people contributing to something. And we already have examples. All the DeFi protocols, many of the NFT protocols are already startups which started as a startup by few individuals, then became DAOs, and now being run by DAOs. For example, DeFi protocols, the DAO communities today vote and force the founding team that they should deploy this protocol, on other chains also. Which, let's say, if the founders don't want to do, but the community can pressure them or put the decisions on them that no, they should deploy it on the chain. So that's like DAO running a startup itself. So it's already happening in a way, I feel.
So let me get your opinion on DAOs as LLCs, because that's becoming a thing too. For example, in Wyoming, you can incorporate a DAO. So it's the internet. The internet is not bound by boundaries and borders. So do you see that as something that's viable and long-term? For example, I start a DAO, I incorporate it in Wyoming. Someone in Singapore can still access what I'm doing. So do you think that actually has any bearing on it?
But I think it's a case-by-case scenario where sometimes to create a bridge to the real world, unfortunately, there is no way to do it right now. Maybe this will be normal, 5, 10 years from now, but suppose you want to sign a contract, like legal binding contract, unfortunately, that needs a legal entity or anything that requires a legal binding contractual relationship needs this legal entity. A good example also is MakerDAO, where it is a DAO, but they have in multiple jurisdictions, I would say, subsidies. They are handling things like salaries. How do we pay salaries in fiat? How do we make bank transfers? How do we contribute to some conferences that are not really native, blockchain native? They need to be paid in fiat. Anything that requires a bridge to the real world needs some kind of legal entity, and that's a great thing that states like Wyoming created this possibility. It used to be just foundations, and now we can have like a physical representation of the DAO. So I don't think it has to be by default. There should be a very specific need to creating this DAO, like paying for paying in fiat.
Yeah. I think, like, again, these these LOCs and LLP structures and all that in the real world are important, because it's not going to be a 0 to 1 journey that we suddenly move from this current kind of world to DAOs on one day. So you will need these intermediate stages where you need these things. But the way this whole space has exploded in the last, I think, 1.5, 2 years, I think it's not crazy to think that some of these company registration departments will come up and say that, okay, we are going to allow the registration of a company or incubation or incorporation of a company on blockchain, let's say on Ethereum. One thing I feel that that's lacking there is only the decentralized identity. And I think that zero knowledge technology has a lot of promise over there. Like we are also, for example, it's going to come out soon, but trying to work on something related to identities where you can have this identity related data. Like for example, company also has a lot of identity related things, like where is the address and all that, and you might not want to put it on a public blockchain, right? So but you still might want to prove that, okay, this company is registered in US, right? So using decentralized identity, you could actually, or as a founder, you don't want to put your information on blockchain, but you should be able to prove that I own this entity and I am a legal resident citizen of US. I think zero knowledge technology has a lot of promise over there, where somebody can issue this entity or incorporate this entity, some state department somewhere in the world, and start that process where this company is established on chain. It has this percent for these addresses, and then the company has some identity information, including the UBOs of the company as well as the company details. And then with zero knowledge technology, you can prove it to external parties wherever you are interacting with them, sign documents and things like that. But again, it will not be a 0 to 1 journey. It will have a lot of branches in between, in the transitory stage.
So we're wrapping up. So my last question has to do with the privacy and anonymous nature of not only DAOs, but crypto in general. So if you're going to be an LLC, in your opinions, should the leadership of the DAO be doxed? Should people know who they are? What do you think?
I think part of the answer was what Sandeep was saying about zero knowledge proofs, where you can keep a privacy for, the real world, but still, in a legal point of view, that's not possible, unfortunately. So I think there is a middle ground here where you can still reveal your real identity, but in a very small context, and that identity will stay private because it's revealed only within that context and not necessarily to the public. Many people will just want to keep their privacy for personal reasons. That can be anything, but it doesn't stop them to identify themselves to a legal entity while still keeping a certain level of privacy using potentially zero knowledge proofs, like Sandeep was saying.
Yeah. And about this doxing thing, like not only the founders, even the community members, for example, there's a lot of civil non-resistance in this DAOs, right? You might think there are 10 large token holders, but that might be one single guy with 10 different addresses, right? So again, with that identity thing, I think somebody needs to solve that Sybil scenario for the community also. But on the founder side, I think the fun part of DAOs is that they are extremely flexible. So if it should be on the community, where community says that, okay, we want our founders to be doxed, or it can say it can be okay with founders being anon, right? And I feel that the way or the future we are moving towards, there will be a fairly high amount of market share or a number of people who would want to be anon. But with blockchains, these addresses of yours become your identity. They show your track record, and they are much bigger track record than your the resumes. We all know everybody fakes things on resume, right? So these can be much better tangible record of what you have done in life, and then based on that you might be trusted also. So I feel that anonymous existence of founders or community members and all that, there will be a large segment of the society which will use that. But if somehow we are able to solve these Sybil attack scenarios, I think that's the perfect match. And yeah, zero knowledge technology can do that, I feel.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank
you
you,
to our
everyone.
audience. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of East Denver. Take care, everybody.